Hey guys, Vytas here. And I want to give you a tip or two on a certain transition that I see a lot in the yoga room. And it's not a transition that I teach very often, but I see it called out by many other teachers. It's not necessarily bad, but it's a little bit more complex than meets the eye. All right, so it's warrior 1 to warrior 2. And you would think, because it's numbered 1 and 2, that this would be a pretty simple transition. But in fact, warrior 1 and warrior 2 are completely different postures, and the transition requires a little bit of finesse, all right? So warrior 1, if you recall, is a pose where you're turning forward, all right? So warrior 1 is what we call a neutral pose, in that you're trying to get your pelvis toward neutral. It's not necessarily neutral. For most people, there still is a little bit of a turning out. But what you're trying to do here with your hips are turning forward. And that being said, to help facilitate that, the back foot angles in generously, and the feet are slightly offset. All right, so warrior 1, I'm here reaching up, lengthening up, and I'm trying to turn my hips toward the front of the mat, okay? Now, warrior 2 is a little bit different. In warrior 2, my feet are on a tightrope here, heel to arch. The back foot is still angled in just slightly, all right? It's not quite turned in as much. And now, instead of trying to turn my hips forward, I'm actually trying to turn my chest open to the side of the room, all right? I'm not squaring my hips, but my hips are definitely not trying to turn toward the front of the mat anymore. So the feet are different, the pelvic position is different, the torso is different, the arms are different, all right? So let's talk about how that might happen in a class, right? So if you're in a class and the teacher says, okay, come all the way up to warrior 1, and then open out to warrior 2. If you just keep the feet the same, your warrior 2 is not going to be right, all right? So when you transition, you have to change the feet a little bit. So from warrior 1, where my back foot's turned in a lot, and my hips are turning forward, what I'm going to do to transition to warrior 2 is I'm just going to bring my hands together for a moment and focus mostly on my feet. All right, I'm going to come out of it a little bit. When you lift out of the pose a little bit, it makes the transition a little bit easier. All right, so I'm going to heel toe my front foot toward the middle of the mat more. All right, so from the side of the mat, I'm just going to scoot it in an inch or two and make sure it tracks straight ahead. And the back foot, I'm just going to make sure it doesn't turn in quite as much. All right, because with warrior 1, the back foot was turning in a lot. Warrior 2, it only turns in a little bit. Now, once the feet are set, then I can sink down deeper and open out into warrior 2, okay? So I'm going to show you in real speed what that might look like. Coming up to warrior 1, and then opening out into warrior 2. All right, that little shift of the feet is an extremely important part of the transition. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a warrior 2 that's not quite right, all right? You want to make sure, again, that front foot, front knee tracking straight ahead. The back foot turns in slightly, and your chest is opening out to the side, all right? So just make sure. And oftentimes I hear teachers do the other transition, crescent pose to warrior 2. So same thing from crescent. As you come up to crescent pose, your hips are turning forward. As you open out to warrior 2, back off a little bit, set the feet up, and then sink down, all right? So just make sure to keep that stuff in mind when you're on the mat in transition. Those little subtleties are really going to help your practice, all right? I'll see you next time.